From its headwaters in the pine forest of Lake Itasca, the Mississippi River flows nearly 500 miles before reaching its first major metropolitan area, the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota.
And as it passes through the Twin Cities, the river goes through more changes than any other stretch along its 2,300-mile course.
We're here in Minneapolis at St. Anthony Falls, the only large natural waterfall along the entire river.
This is so amazing. What part did the river play in the settlement of the Twin Cities?
Well, you could really say that the river gave birth to both cities, but in a different way for each one of them. St. Paul was as far upstream as boats were able to travel, and so that became a port. But there were rapids between St. Paul and where we are here, right next to downtown Minneapolis, that prevented the boats from getting up this far. So Minneapolis was born for a different reason, and that had to do with the waterfall itself that provided water power for early industries. And the falls are amazing, but in another way altogether, and it has to do with the geology. So at the end of the last ice age, about 11,000 years ago, this waterfall was about 15 miles downstream where St. Paul is now. And there was a huge amount of water flowing over it because of the glaciers were melting at that time, and the waterfall eroded rapidly. And so really the waterfall migrated 15 miles in 11,000 years, traveling about 6.8 feet per year to get to this point. And in geologic terms, that is like racing. That is really fast. I'm going to introduce you to somebody else who's really an expert on the Mississippi River here in the Twin Cities, and we'll get a chance to learn more about all this stuff. So girls, I want to introduce you to a friend, John Anfinson of the National Park Service, a great guy to talk to learn about St. Anthony Falls and the river in the Twin Cities here.
So where are we?
We're on the upper St. Anthony Falls Lock and Dam. It is the highest lock and dam on the whole Mississippi River, both from the perspective that it's the furthest up the Mississippi. It's also the tallest at about 50-foot lift when barges used to come through this. There's locks and dams all the way to St. Louis, 29 in all. And before the locks and dams, the river would go up with the floodwaters, but then it would go down and become so low, boats couldn't get up the river. So they had to build a whole series of locks and dams, that kind of like a stair step that lifted the boats all the way up to St. Anthony Falls. At St. Anthony Falls, there's such a steep grade here. It's got to get above St. Anthony Falls that here we needed locks just to lift boats up over and above the falls.
What role did the river play for industries?
For Minneapolis, it really gave birth to the city. There are two principal commodities, timber first, and you need to build your city, and we had lots of timber north on the Mississippi, and you could float it down the river, and they could run the sawmills with the power of the river. Flour milling was really took over here. Started in the 1850s, by 1880, it begins leading the world in production, Minneapolis does. And for the next 50 years, Minneapolis is the top producer of flour in the country and at times the world, because of the power of St. Anthony.
Are there any invasive species that come along with the Mississippi?
You know, the Mississippi River can take a lot of commerce, and your boats can come up, but so can fish. And so there's a species called Asian carp. There's 4 of them, bighead, silver, grass, and black. And they take away different parts of our ecosystem and are competing with our native fish, and they are coming up the Mississippi River right now.
Yeah, and we're in a national park?
Yeah, the whole Mississippi River through the Twin Cities, 72 miles, is a unit of the national park system.
So hearing what you're saying, John, just reminds me of how much our relationship with the river has changed here in the Twin Cities. You know, in the early days, the river was just so important for St. Paul and Minneapolis, and then as industry changed and commercial navigation changed, in some ways we turned our back to the river, and now it's a national park. Now the community is kind of embracing this river again. I just think that is so cool. So thanks for sharing that. Great story.
Thank you both for helping us with everything that we've learned.
We've learned so much about this amazing river. We've seen how the upper Mississippi River has shaped cities, communities, and industries.
And as we continue to travel down it, we'll see how it shapes lifestyles and commerce all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico.
So enjoy your trip down the Mississippi.